as you mentioned before, that it was not a blood libel. How do we get from Norwich, 12th century, to it morphing into now blood libels? How does that happen? When does that happen? And now we're seeing throughout history, anytime there's this kind of accusation, it's linked to a blood libel.
Yeah, well, blood is pretty potent in all cultures. It's connected in this case. I should say, though, that although I do not use the word blood libel, because the concentration isn't on the blood and its uses, as it will become later. The Jews needed to make matzot. They need it in order to create cosmetics, to remove their sickly pallor, all sorts of uses. That is not there. But the roots are there in as much as the actual scene of the execution, supposed alleged execution of the child William in the innermost secrecy of a Jewish home in Norwich on that fateful day, as it were, in March 1144, as it is told. It uses the language of sacrifice. It uses the language of Christ's passion. The boy is tortured in various unusual ways. There's this particularly nasty rope, knotted rope that is tied around his head and neck, and in a particular way described in great detail. And it has 5 knots denoting 5. 5 is very important. It's the 5 wounds of Christ on his body. Always this use of the image of the sheep being led to the slaughter, and the hanging in the doorway, not on the cross, but in the doorway, this hanging thing. So there are lots. The rhetoric is very, very much related to the bloody scene of the crucifixion. And in the course of the 13th century, this becomes more and more elaborated, particularly through the work of Franciscan friars, who are the great experts in late medieval European preaching, who develop a way of offering the laity a very, very elaborate and gory representation of Christ on the cross, which they then invite people to enter into. That is to say, there's this what historians call Christocentric piety. It's a big, long word, but it's basically they direct the devotional energies of Christians towards mediated. It has to go through, as it were, some sort of engagement with the scene on the cross, which is bloody, which is increasingly told as being very bloody in very graphic terms. If you look at a representation of the crucifixion, say from the 10th century, you see a cross, you see the body on the cross, and you see the mother Mary, the evangelist John, looking sad either side. You look in the 13th century, it's bleeding. Either side of the cross, there are crowds and crowds, including crowds of Jews baying for blood. These are all inventions, literally, just like Thomas's tale is an invention based within the materials of the culture of Christianity in the 12th century in a monastery. 13th century, the Franciscans developed this sort of very bloody and very Jew-involved type of power. And in that world, blood is the currency.